delighted to have been asked to moderate and to participate in this symposium today. I can think of no place I'd rather be than right here with you this afternoon, talking about one of my most favorite people. We are delighted that you have chosen to join us today also. Today we are reflecting on the philosophy of Jean Charles Young through the eyes of her family, her friends, her colleagues, and the young people her spirit engaged. Reflecting on Jean's beliefs and her contributions to humanity always provide us with a renewed motivation to care more and to act more courageously. But we are remembering her especially today because it is a momentous occasion for the Atlanta Fulton Commission on Children and Youth, an organization she loved. After this symposium, the commission members will make an announcement in honor of their 10th anniversary that reflects both Jean's deep influence on their work and the commission's deep gratitude for her leadership. With this announcement, the commission will also kick off a 3-year fundraising and promotional campaign to usher in a new era of youth work in Atlanta. By understanding Jean's vision and the creativity she brought to the development of the commission, you will be able to understand the important role that she and her founding co-chair, Lucy Carpenter Vance, believed the organization could play in the development of youth. You will be able to see clearly how the concept for a true partnership between youth and adults was born. You will understand why the important announcement coming up later is so fitting. And you will have some idea of the future for Atlanta that they are working with young people to build. All of us here this afternoon are special. Special because of our admiration for Jean. Special because of our love for our community. And special because we believe in young people. Before we begin the symposium, we will turn to music and thought to inspire us. We're going to ask Reverend Orange to lead us in this little light of mine.
If you stay up here and help me. And listen, everybody else, why don't we stand up and do it? Leader, come on up here. You're a good singer. Alice, where you at? We done got old, but we still know it. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine everywhere I go. I'm gonna let it shine everywhere I go. I'm gonna let it shine everywhere I go. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I've got the light of freedom. I'm gonna let it shine. Well, I've got the light of freedom. I'm gonna let it shine. Well, I've got the light of freedom. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All right.
At this time, we will have an invocational reading by Ms. Lisa Austin.
afternoon. One of Gene Young's inspirations was the writings of Khalil Gibran on children. We usually think of these words as speaking to parents, but Gibran's words speak to us on how to relate to all children and young people in our community and world. My mother was guided by this passage to allow young people to make decisions about their own lives and seek their own destinies. Think about how you help empower young people as you listen to the words of Khalil Gibran. Your children are not your children. They're the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable. Amen.
I saw Councilman Martin earlier. I think he may have stepped out. That was the next thing on my program that I was given me. So I'm going to step off the program just 1 minute because I'd like for you, and most of you in here have been around with everybody for the longest, and so you know everybody. But I would like for you to, at least at this particular time, to present Jean's family that's here with us today, and let everybody see them. You just saw one. You saw her daughter, Lisa. And so I'm just going to ask you all to stand and wave at everybody else and let them know that you are here, that the family is here. Okay? Okay? Okay. And we will be hearing from some of the others. Oh, Councilman Martin, would you come at this time to bring greetings to us? We have a proclamation that came to us from you. Yes. Thank you.
Greetings. It's always a pleasure to be in this family, and to the Honorable Congressman Ambassador Andy Young and all members of the family, to all the panelists. I'm sure today is going to be another enlightened day for us to be able to exchange information and talk about something that is close to all of us, and that it was young people. And we know that in honoring Ms. Young and with the middle school and all the other activities, that it's a small token for the contribution that she made through Dream Jamboree as far as the city is concerned, and many other projects. So this was her life work. So I'm always honored at the opportunity to be a part of any celebration or any accomplishment settings that speak of her work. We have also here today this proclamation. Lamar Willis, if not here, will be coming. There are other members of the council that share in this proclamation. In fact, all of them signed it. And so on behalf of the 15 members of the council, I would hope to that if Lamar arrives in time, we sometimes share these whereases, but I'll start off with, and whereas Atlanta Fulton Commission on Children and Youth, an advocacy organization that promotes the well-being of children by involving them in the decision-making process. That effort was co-founded by Ms. Jean Child Young in 1990. And whereas Jean Child Young was an educator, a lecturer, community volunteer, and civil and human rights activist, along with having lived a lifetime of expressing concerns not only for our local children, but on a national and international level, and in particular issues relating to women and children. And whereas Jean Child Young was a civil rights activist, intimately involved with numerous demonstrations and marches for human rights, including the 1963 March on Washington, the 1965 March from Selma to Montgomery, the 1966 March in Mississippi, and the Poor People's Campaign in 1968. And whereas Ms. Jean Child Young also founded and chaired for 7 years the Mayor's Task Force on Public Education, which developed the annual Dream Jamboree and the Mayor's Scholars Program for the youth of Atlanta. And whereas the Atlanta Fulton County on Children and Youth in memories of Ms. Young, and in recognition of her great work in Atlanta and around the world, does hereby proudly change its name to the Jean Child Young Institute for Youth Leadership. Now, therefore, we, the Atlanta City Council, and on behalf of the citizens of Atlanta and all the lives that have been touched by Ms. Young, do hereby proclaim Thursday, June 27th, year 2002, as Jean Child Young Day in our city. This is signed to and sealed and affixed. And I would ask the ambassador to come forward. And Ms. Johnson, where is she? Who, yes, Ambassador Young, you come forward. This lady once worked for the city and decided to go over to the county, and I was glad to work with her when we attempted to establish, and did establish, a youth commission for the city of Atlanta. She took off and went over to the county and got her commission going, and it's been a part of her life work. And I believe you worked for the congressman during your period of his administration. Yeah. So, on behalf of the city, of the many proclamations that you've received, we are proud to extend this one to you on behalf of Ms. Young.
Very good.
Now let us begin the discussion of the philosophy and work of Jean Child Young by hearing from those who knew her. We will begin by asking each of our guests to introduce themselves and to tell us how they have been involved with Jean's life and her work. We will start with Reverend James Orange. Would you kind of let us know how Jean has inspired you and what your life has meant, and what her life has meant to you?
Thank you, Marion. In 1963, I had to make a ride to South Carolina and Georgia with Andy. And unbeknown, he brought me back to his house on Chickamauga. And said, James, this is James from Birmingham. You gonna sleep here tonight? Little did I know that I'd be sleeping there for almost a year. And in and out. And Jean never wavered when Andrew and them was kids and running around. She made a place for me, Andrew Marset, Robert Seals, and Liz Hayes, who really was some of the first field staff, well, the first field staff that they put on SCLC's staff. But I watched, and I guess three things have stood out in my life about Jean that has really kept me motivated and kept me moving. In 1990, Alice and myself started to work and doing some stuff with South Africa and, you know, pushing Andy to move forward. So anything that we wanted to get Andy to support, we would always go to Gene first and say, Gene, we need you to talk to him. And well, now you know he got his own mind, but this is what we need. And we ended up hosting Winnie Mandela to do a tour that he supported, whether he knew he had supported it or not, because Gene had supported it. But when she started to talking to us about young folk through the Dream Jamboree and doing the Celebrate Difference each January and having us to come and role play what went on in the Civil Rights Movement and redo the Birmingham March or redo Bloody Sunday or talk about workshops and stuff, she really insisted that we bring folk who were people who actually participated. And each year we had a cadre of folk, and for years up until the center stopped it. And we're trying to continue that by what we do each January. But Gene started that. A lot of stuff that we do at the ML King March, with the concerts, with the marches, with the symposium, all of that got started by Gene, and we basically have continued it. Then, when she sort of inspired us during the Rodney King verdict to go back again to Andy, and he was able to talk to Mrs. King and to Mrs. Shabazz, and we went to Los Angeles. Alice had a couple of kids, and we went out to Los Angeles and met with the Crips and the Bloods, and talked about how do you stop the violence. And they ended up coming up with a truce that most folk don't know, that Gene's inspiration helped us inspire Rachel and Leon Gillette to continue the truce with the Crips and the Bloods. And when we had our first session at the King Center for the first time, Mrs. Shabazz, Mrs. King, and Andy sit around a room with some young folk who really thought they was bad until they found out about some of the things that we had done in the Civil Rights Movement. And a lot of their badness left, and they started to doing it and living to this day the truths that really got started. And I guess the most important thing is the thing that we're talking about celebrating here today. When Lisa called me on the telephone and asked me would I be here today to deal with the new idea of the Fulton Commission and where will we go, I looked for a call from Lucy, but Alice called. And I said that I'd be here because if we could continue the life, the legacy of what Gene started with young folk, that's what this whole endeavor is about. The commission, when I was asked to serve on this board, which I don't get to board meetings often, but whenever there's something to happen, I'm there. Each year at our march, we have 2 commission members to serve as marshals at the march. None of that would be done, and none of that would continue to be done had it not been for the fingerprints that Gene left. And I know Lisa, Bo, Andrea, and Paula, who's not here, and the grandkids, and Andy, y'all have to be proud that she lives in us. She lives in Alice. Alice will bug and nag you to keep anything going as far as this commission. And I thank Andy for allowing me to meet Gene and to meet the family and to be where I am today. Thank you very much.
One other thing about Jean was that she was a teacher in every sense of the word. And we have one of her dearest friends and fellow educators to tell us about Jean the educator. Sammy.
Thank you, Marion, very much. Let me first say that I knew Jean as an educator, of course, also as a mother of 4 children, the daughter of Idella, her mother, the daughter-in-law of Mrs. Young, and I saw her operate also as an athlete, and she was very, very competitive. But I've been asked to speak shortly this morning about her as an educator. Let me carry you back to the early 60s when things were different than they are now. Not too different, Reverend Orange, but they are different. And her innovative and new approaches to learning would be questioned or looked upon suspectly by the administrators in the beginning. But as time wore on, these same administrators would be converted either by their success, the success of the program, or by the persistence that Jean would bring to the school. She was persistent, but she was never abrasive. She always remained a lady. Now, back in the 60s, things were like this. You had the school and you had the school rooms. And Jean taught primary grades, kindergarten, first grade. And teachers in those days would have basically 3 or more groups. You know how that goes. You might remember these as I call them off. You had the Eagles, you had the Hawks, and you might have had the Sparrows or the Crows. Or you might have the Redbirds, the Yellowbirds, or the Bluebirds. Some teachers had lollipops, candy bars, and suckers. Now, the children would know by the end of the week where they failed. They knew that they were going to be a lollipop or a sucker, or bluebird, yellowbird, redbird. And this would go on all year. The children would be grouped in these groups, and more than likely would be promoted next year to the next grade level in those same groups. Therefore, children would stay basically in those groups as they went through the elementary grades. Jean did not believe in that. Jean had a classroom that if she had 25 children in that classroom, she might have 20 groups, because she knew that each child could learn at their own pace. Now imagine the difficulty it would be to make a lesson plan that would cover 25 different children when you have a plan for each child. That was not very easily done, and therefore she didn't exactly do it that way. She was very creative, but she got her job done. And if she thought that a child could learn, that child would learn by the end of the semester. She would be very persistent and make sure that the administrators were on board with her, or she would have confrontations with them. But they were always ladylike, and she would prevail. You would walk into her classroom, and in those days you would have learning centers, but she had so many learning centers. She had the art center, the social studies, the language arts. She had PE. But she also had an area in the room that was for reading, for individual children to go to and read whenever they had an opportunity to do so. Her room, the environment, was a learning display of materials. She had things everywhere. I mean, the walls were covered. Even had things hanging from the ceiling. She would ask the custodian even to come in and bring things, and they would hang from the ceiling. It was difficult sometimes to get through her room because she had everybody involved in the learning process. Another thing that I do remember very well, when you walked into that room, you had students learning everywhere. You had peer tutoring going on. And if you didn't, you just wouldn't know who the teacher was except for her size. She was the largest thing in the room, but everybody was busy working with everybody else. She had that type of environment that was well appreciated. She won the parents over, she won other students, she won the students over, of course, and she won other teachers over. And eventually the principals would have to say Jean is doing what she should do. The children prevailed because Jean worked hard at it. I want to thank you very much.
I hope you are seeing just how all of these things are woven together to bring us to the day. If you see all throughout, it was the involvement of young people. And that's what we are talking about today. The same thing happened when you heard mentioned about the Dream Jamboree that started during Mayor Young's administration, where we started the Mayor's Task Force on Public Education. But Jean said, I want to do something where every child in high school will have the opportunity to at least get to see what's out there. Most college fairs before Dream Jamboree was for juniors and seniors in May, which was by that time most seniors had decided where they were going, or it was too late for them to really make a decision. It was also always held for usually college-bound students that had already been identified. But Dream Jamboree was something different. Jean said every high school student, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. Actually, we didn't bring the seniors. We let the seniors work the event. They helped the others because they came to talk about finalizing things rather than just coming to see. But she insisted that every student be given that opportunity. So what happened? We were able to get students that actually made up their minds at Dream Jamboree as freshmen that they were going to study differently so that they could go to college. Some of them had never, ever thought of it as an option for them. That's what made Dream Jamboree special. It wasn't just another college fair. Although we had colleges and universities there, we also had the unions there. We also had other companies there that had post-secondary training because we wanted students to understand that they could actually make it. They could actually consider higher education as an option, or they could consider training beyond high school as an option to get better job opportunities. And what did we do with Celebrate Difference? Celebrate Difference was an opportunity to bring children together during King Week to learn about the nonviolence. We wanted young people to understand what it really meant, what nonviolence was all about. And they had to learn it, as James said, from people that had really been trained by the master himself. And they understood it. So they came and actually taught these children over, we would bring them in large groups for several hours during the day, and they would have the opportunity to learn about nonviolence and how they could become better citizens. This was about Jean saying, I want these children to have this opportunity. We want them to know what is King Week all about. And it was an opportunity to provide them with that. At this time, we are going to ask Cheryl Riley-Griffith to come and tell us about how Jean was able to rouse others to action.
Thank you, Marion. I work for a television station, and I've worked for TV almost 30 years. And I want to let you know Jean Young knew how to get television coverage. She was a master at it. And one of the vivid images in my mind is when Alice or Lucy called me and they said, Jean is real concerned about what the state government is doing for children. And she is organizing a demonstration where she's going to have people with signs, and we're going to say, don't balance the budget on the backs of our children. And I saw that image, and our newsroom was there. Immediately, it's hard to get people to come out and cover things, but what they're looking for is visual images, and that is an image that still sticks in my mind today. And while I had seen Jean on television for many years, even growing up in Waco, Texas, and I had read about her and admired her, I saw her in person for the first time when I volunteered for the UNCF, United Negro College Fund's first telethon. Jean had style. She had class. And oh, she was sassy. She had a group of women who were her friends, and I always thought, you know, what kind of person it is to attract so many friends around her. And not only were they around Jean, but they would dress like Jean. And I just thought, you know, I saw this group of women at this UNCF telethon. They all were wearing white, and Jean was wearing white, and they were very pointedly walking around the set. And you knew that Jean was on a mission, and that mission was to make sure that people wrote out their checks so that kids could have college scholarships. But in 1982, I learned just how pointed her mission could be, to help young people get a jump on what they would do with themselves after college. She had contacted me about the Dream Jamboree and the Mayor's Task Force on Public Education. And I invited Jean to come over to the television station to meet with my boss at that time, and I've had about 20 since being in TV. And this boss, you know, just wasn't too particular about anything, but he said, you know, it's the mayor's wife, so, you know, I'll talk to her. Before she left, Jean had $10,000 from my boss, and this was a first and probably the only time he gave up anything. But I also saw something that has helped me to work with people through the years. Jean had her own special way of attracting the best and the brightest. I watched Jean and Marion Jones and later Alice work together, and I learned a great lesson. Smart visionaries surround themselves with smart people, and that's how you get the job done. Jean often invited me and others to her home. The Mayor's Task Force on Education, she'd say, okay, come on over, we're going to have a barbecue. Or if I'd see her in the grocery store, she'd say, come on by the house, or come on and do this. And, you know, I just felt special. But I knew that I wasn't any more special than the person down the street who had helped her out, or maybe they didn't help her out, but she was just that kind of person who wanted you to be around her. And at that point, I just felt a closeness, and I felt like, and I told her that I would be a volunteer for life. It was the special way that she treated people, kings and queens, as well as those who didn't have lofty titles. And the organization that she co-founded with Lucy Vance, I think may have been her greatest achievement. As a mother who's had some serious challenges with her own children, I know how difficult it is for people to care about the kid who's not going to Harvard or the kid who doesn't advance. What about those kids that are difficult? And I think this organization is one that cares about those children. But who cares about children? They don't have a vote. They don't have money. This organization does, and Jean Charles Young cared. To paraphrase a quote by the French film director Robert Bresson, Jean Young made visible what without her might perhaps have never been seen.
Today we celebrate an organization that Jean co-founded with Lucy Carpenter Vance, and we're going to ask Lucy to come and tell us about that experience.
Thank you, Marion, so much. Well, first, Jean and I were friends through our work on the board of Families First, where we both served on the advocacy committee. And I had served on the, thank you, I had served on the Governor's Commission on Children and Youth, where the state was putting aside some funds to form local commissions, and we're making those funds available to people who were willing to start them up. So Jean and I, with the support of Families First, decided we would take on this challenge. And I must say there's some other wonderful people in this room that were involved early on too, and Alice is going to introduce some of them later, but just on this panel, you've heard we've got Reverend Orange and Cheryl Gripper, and then later Mike Rinder. But it was a wonderful group of people. And in the 90s, very early 90s, Families First gave us the support of a staff person, Mary Frances Williams, which really did help our effort. And then the Whitehead Foundation gave us some, which is part of the Woodruff interest, gave us a 3-year operating grant, which made a lot possible for us. That was very generous of them. We got some money from the Community Foundation to do a needs assessment, and we were hoping that this needs assessment was really going to kind of point us in a direction and give us a starting point of where to tackle some of the needs facing our children and youth. Well, initially, we, the adults involved, had envisioned a commission that would be operated by all adults, and we would advocate for changes in the system. We were going to bring together community leaders. We were going to focus on needs of children and youth. We were going to then educate the community about all these needs and then work to make these changes. We also wanted to focus on the whole child rather than attacking some of these special needs on a piecemeal basis. But we were so overwhelmed by the results of this needs assessment that we really didn't know where to start. So Jean had the brilliant idea of, well, if we're working towards making changes for children and youth, why don't we ask them what they think? And when Andy had been the ambassador, Jean had served as the chairperson of the U.S. National Commission on the International Year of the Child. And when involved in that work, the commission had somehow managed to incorporate the input of youth and children into their work. And so Jean thought that that would be a wonderful idea for us to do the same. So that was the beginning of our partnership with youth. We decided that if we wanted to get this information from kids, that we needed to hold hearings where young people could come and talk about what they saw as the real needs facing them in their community. But in order to pull that off, we decided, well, we really need some young people to help us organize it. So this will be done in a way that will make young people comfortable in talking about their needs. And I know Mike Render, who was a part of that first group, Kids for Change, that was a result of this, is going to probably talk a little bit about it. But it was a very special group of young people who helped us organize 4 hearings throughout the county, which invited young people to come and talk to us about what they saw as important. And we had community leaders there, and their instructions were all the adults were there to listen, the kids were there to talk, and we as adults were there to listen and to learn from the kids, and that's what happened. After these 4 hearings were held throughout the county, we identified some major issues which kind of launched our work. And education, drugs and alcohol, sex education, and violence were some that we really began to deal with. At the end of the hearings, we kind of expected the youth to be ready to move on, but they decided this had been such an important part of their lives that they wanted to continue. So these Thursday night meetings that we were holding to prepare for these hearings are still continuing to this very day. One of the most important things that Jean and I and the other adults did was to hire Alice Johnson. And those of you who've worked with Alice know that she is the reason all of this has continued forward, and we could not do it without her dedication and commitment. So I want to say a special word of thanks to Alice for all she continues to do for us. Now, one of the things we were asked to do in this was to kind of tell a little story about Jean. And there's so many, it's kind of hard to pick one, but as you all know, Jean was sick during the early years that we were forming the commission, and she couldn't always be with us physically, but her spirit has always continued to guide our work. It did then, even when she couldn't be with us physically, and it does to this day. She was so clear about how important young people are to all of us and about the difference that they can make in the world. In fact, I keep a photo that was taken of the 2 of us for an article that was written on the work of the commission. I keep that photo of Jean and me on my refrigerator, so it reminds me constantly of her inspiration and how important this work is. And you heard Cheryl Gripper mention earlier this event that was held at the Capitol that involved lobbying for not balancing the budget on the back of our kids. Some cuts were proposed to be made in the state budget in the area of children and youth programs, and we really thought that was wrong. So we were going to stage a rally. Now, Jean said it really was a demonstration, but we figured if we called it a rally, we'd be more likely to get some more people there. So we called it a rally, and we had these wonderful little smocks that had "Don't Balance the Budget" on the backs of our kids on the back of the smocks. And Jean and her family, Jean was not well and was at home, but wanted to be a part of this, and her family and friends, and I think Andy may have even helped a little bit with some of the work on some of those smocks, psychedelic colors and wonderful little drawings. But we wore those smocks that day very proudly, and we knew that Jean wasn't going to be able to be with us. But we looked out in the distance, and there, kind of way off on a side street, Jean was there, and she was sitting in the back of the seat of the car. But it was so important to us that she still was with us. And I want to close by saying that that really is how I like to think of Jean still. So much an integral part of our work, just a little bit off there away in the distance. Thank you.
Most often, we can only hope that the spirit and strength we try so hard to offer can reinforce the fortitude of others. I think that Jean would be especially pleased to see Mike Render participating in this symposium today. Speak to us, Mike.
All right, good afternoon. First of all, I want to apologize for not being slacked up and tied up, but I rap, and you know, that's my excuse. But I actually just came from taking some pictures, you know, and I had to look urban, as they tell me. But it's funny because this is how I met her, in jeans and, you know, a t-shirt, less expensive t-shirt, but a t-shirt nonetheless. And she always kind of accepted just me as me, you know what I mean? And I guess, like, my best Jean story, like, is like my first. And it's ironic, like, I'm sitting up here calling her Jean, because, you know, when you hear about important people, you know what I mean? I grew up a poor kid right here in Atlanta, so, you know, Andrew Young, you know, man, that was like saying, you know, you're meeting the president's wife. I was like, okay, Andrew Young, you know, we got pictures of this guy in my house, him and Dr. King and Jesus, they're right there. And so I meet her, and of course, I'm calling her, you know, Mrs. Young, and all the other kids are, and she, you know, she tells us, you know, call me Jean. But, you know, you hear it and you don't hear it, because, you know, this is the lady who stands next to the guy who stands next to Jesus in my home. And I actually introduced my high school girlfriend to her at a function, and I don't know how to introduce her. You know what I mean? You do what you see the newscasters do. And I didn't realize that, you know, male chauvinism and sexism travels even through the news. So what do I introduce her as? Mrs. Andrew Young. And she cut me off and said, honey, I'm Jean. And I never called her Mrs. Andrew Young after that. And I have to say that she's one of the most courageous women I ever met. Period. You know what I mean? And she had this streak of fierceness that would come out at different times. And I was glad it came out at that time, because it cleared up any confusion for me. I just knew from that point, this is Jean, this is Alice, and the adults that I work with are their first names, because we're comrades in a movement. And I'm not a subject to be told what to do by them. She really helped, and that was a defining moment for me to understand that no matter how society ranks people, in a movement, we're all comrades. And in a movement, we're all responsible for certain facets of the movement, which equates us in different ways, no matter how people outside the movement view us. So I was really happy that she checked me that night, and I'll never forget that, because she really helped me to understand better that night the equality of women and men, and the equality for children and adults, and the equality for races. So thank you, Jean, for helping me to understand that better. I'd just like to say that along with that, three things that I really kind of picked up from her were love, were courage, and were advocacy. And when I talk about love, I don't mean that kind of wishy-washy love when you work with people that are quote-unquote less fortunate than you, and you feel as though you have to give them this sappy-syrupy charity. I really felt like she had a passion and zeal and love for what she did with children. I felt like that what she did came from a place that was really intangible. It wasn't about these are poor kids and I want to work with them to help them not be poor. It was they're poor kids and they deserve to organize around the issues that they choose to organize around. And I could tell at the times when she was there that she loved the moments that we realized our own power. And that transferred to us, and it helped us love what we did in spite of how hard it was. So that I picked up from her. And in courageousness, I didn't necessarily see it come from her, but it's amazing the type of, I knew she was a courageous person, but it was amazing the type of courageousness that she inspired from other people, and namely Alice. I remember when Alice first came up to me, it was me, and we were at a gang conference. We was at the conference at the King Center with Reverend Orange, and it was like gang members everywhere, Black Gangster Disciples, Crips, Bloods, El Rukins, Black Teams for Advancement is an organization I was with, and it was just like a bunch of guys who were in neighborhood cliques and high school rivalries. And this white lady walks up to me with big red hair and says, "Hi, I want you to, I'm Alice Johnson from the Atlanta Fulton Commission on Children and Youth, and I'd like for you to come help me plan a series." And I'm thinking to myself, who is this chick walking up to 20 black dudes? And I'm thinking to myself, this is the bravest white woman I've ever met in my life. And it was because she was surrounded by courage. And in the years after Jean has been gone, I worked with the commission for 2 years actually. There have been points where I could tell her courage was faltering, and I realized that it was my job to reciprocate that, to take the courage that she had got from Jean, that she had given to me, to give back to her. And courage is like a cup, almost. It spills over, but if there's a hole in it and it gets low, then somebody has to keep pouring courage into it. So thank Alice for carrying on Jean's legacy of courage. And lastly was advocacy. And I got to say, the commission members, Lucy, Brad, Cinda, all of you guys have took her lessons of advocacy and really showed us as young people how to carry that out and how to be advocates for one another. So along with love and along with courage, she taught us how to stand up for one another and say, this is wrong. And the people who can fix it are the people who have been done, who the wrong has been, the people who've been wrong are the only people who can fix it. The only people who have the answers for poor people are poor people. The only people who have the answers for women are women. And it's up for the power groups to give up power, to listen to the people that are disenfranchised, to listen to the people who are shut out, who are sick, who are lowly, who are shut in, and use whatever power they have as the people who are powerless tell them to. It's up for us to do that. As a man, it's my job to do that for women. As an adult, it's my job to advocate on behalf of children. So I just want to say thanks, Jean and family, for loaning her to us. Thank God for loaning her to us. For sharing your love with us, for sharing your courage with us, and for, at the end of the day, teaching me how to be a better advocate on behalf of young people. Thank you.
A living example of everything we talked about today. But there was no greater love that Jean possessed than the love of her family. We are particularly blessed to have the author of the only book about Jean, her daughter, Andrea Young. Andrea, accept our warm welcome and talk to us about your mother.
Thank you. Thank you to Alice and to Lisa for pulling this together. This is a really wonderful occasion. One of the reasons I wrote this book is so that I could think of my mother without crying, but all of these wonderful stories, just have, made me feel very emotional. And one of the other reasons I wrote this book was because of realizing that while I, as her child, thought that my mother had this kind of magic and thought that my mother was
the kind of person who could, kiss you and make it all better, that so many other people have been touched by her that felt the same way. And I think that we've all heard that today, the many ways that her personal relationship with people transformed lives and brought things to this city and to this community and to this nation that that continue to bear fruit and continue to grow. So I would like, Lucy mentioned that my mother was the chairperson of the International Year of the Child. As part of the United Nations observation, she was the chair of the American part of that. And I wanted to read a section from that report because it is a reminder, Alice, of all the work that remains to be done. Over 60 million strong, 1/3 of America's population, children are the adults, the citizens of tomorrow. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, these children will vote or not vote. They will be productive working members of society, or they will lack the necessary skills, opportunities, and supports to make a decent life for themselves. They will be equipped to cope with an increasingly complex technological society, or they will not. They will be well-educated, independent, informed citizens, or they will be functionally illiterate, malleable, and easily led. The choice is ours and theirs. We make that choice by design or default, but either way, we will reap the results. This report was presented to President Jimmy Carter. And here we are today, the same report can be written. That 1 in 3 American children is behind in school, that 1 in 3 will be poor during some part of their childhood, that 1 in 8 will never graduate from high school, that 1 in 2 will live with a single-parent family at some point in their childhood. My mother taught me many things, and one of the things she taught me was that it is not enough to find a safe place for oneself and for one's own children, but that we must be concerned about all the children in our community and even in our world. She played an important part through this commission and through her role with the International Year of the Child as a chair, as a member of the board for the Children's Defense Fund, of lifting the children's issue around this nation. We have a wonderful scrapbook of those years that she went around to every state, meeting with commissions, encouraging states to think about their commitment to children, and really helped to lay the seeds of a national children's rights movement. She encouraged the governor's wives who typically led these movements in the states. One of those is now Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton. But she also taught me by example to provide the emotional security for one's own children. We knew as her children that we came first with her. We were seen and heard. We were included whenever our parents entertained, whether the guest was Martin Luther King or UN ambassadors from around the globe. Today on the national scene, the Congress proposes to give permanent tax cuts to the richest 1% of Americans and run deficits. And we are told that there is not enough money for our children. Not enough money for child care, only enough for 1 in 10 of the children of low-income working families. Not enough for Head Start, just 4 of 10 eligible children. Those are children below the poverty line. Not enough for after-school programs, even though study after study affirms that the money that we invest now in our children saves 7 times that amount in prison costs, in social services supports, and in the lost productivity of these brilliant minds that our children represent. What would Mother do? When Georgia, as you have heard, when Georgia had a fiscal crisis and my mother was taking chemotherapy, she organized a children's protest. She gathered Marion Jones, Alan Johnson, and others to come together at the house to make bibs for the children that said, "Don't balance the budget on my back." When prosperity comes to a slowdown, the temptation is to cut the kids. We have to we dedicate ourselves to draw a different kind of line in the sand and to say nationally that do not balance the budget on the backs of our kids. We have to say it then, we have to continue to say it now, that in our nation, the best and most important investment that we can make is in the talents, the gifts, the brilliance, the compassion, the abilities of our children, and believe in their possibilities, believe in their strengths, believe in what they can bring to us, because we cannot afford to lose a single one. No level of attrition is acceptable. And I believe that if my mother were here today, she would exhort us to continue to do all that we can to make sure that this wealthy society makes a place for all of its children and also leads the way of making this world a safe and loving place for every child, wherever he or she is born, anywhere on this globe. Thank you. I'm going to make a little adjustment here. You know, we wanted 7 mics, we got 1. So we're going to make this work, and we're going to have a little conversation up here for a while. And if any of you would like to join in on this discussion and you have a comment that you would like to make, please feel free to join us. Based on these wonderful stories we've been getting here today, I think a clear picture of Jean's philosophy is here. If each of you had to reduce it to its essence, how would you describe her vision? And I'm going to ask you, Sammy, to start us off.
I really think that if it's correct in calling a woman a gladiator, I would like to apply that to Jean. She was on the front line trying to make things best for children. Not only her children, which we have heard from Andrea, but the children in her classroom. And your question again, what's your question again?
If you had to reduce her philosophy to one thing, how would you describe her vision?
Give, give, give. Give until you can have no more to give. She was a giving person, very caring.
I would just say her vision to me was very focused. I mean, there was no wondering about what she was thinking or what she was about. It was very clear and very focused. And when you're trying to get a message across in an over-communicated society, she knew the secret to doing that, and that's just being very simple and very focused.
I think in working closely with Jean, I was so impressed by how much she valued each person as an individual, that each person brought their strengths, and that it was very important to recognize that. And in particular, our young people, that they deserve to be listened to and treated with great respect, because we lived in a society, and we did then and we do now, where children were looked at as problems, and the focus was on, you know, what they're doing wrong and how to deal with that. But what Jean brought to our work was the ability to look at them as real potential, and there's really the strength for our organization. And I think that's been the heart of this adult-youth partnership that our commission has worked so hard to help become really a model for the whole community.
Well, I would echo what Sammy Bacot said. The give, or another way of thinking, is serve. That she was all about service in whatever the environment was, her home, her church, the school where she worked, the community where she lived. She was there to make a difference.
I guess, as I said earlier, it was just simply love for the work, the courage to do the work, and teaching others to be advocates was, you know, being an advocate on the behalf of young people. So love, courage, and advocacy were the biggest points I picked up from it.
Well, I think the clearest vision for me today about Gene was Mike. To hear Mike talk about where he come from, where he was, where he is, and where he's going. And I think if we look at Mike being just getting a Grammy, platinum record out, Outkast, he with him, you know, but he there. But I think with DJ, our officer in the Navy, if we go back to all of those young guys, they're doing something today, and that's the best vision for Gene, is what has happened to these young folk.
Based on that and all of the things that are happening in our world today and all of the violence and things that's happening to youth, what do you think that Gene would say to us today? Andrea, would you?
Well, I think that the importance of nonviolence and the belief in nonviolence. One of the stories about how much my mother believed in nonviolence is in my father's first book, where when I was a baby and the Klan rode on my parents' very modest home in Thomasville, Georgia. And my mother was a pretty good shot with a rifle, and she had one that, you know, for hunting. And so my father says, well, I'll go down and talk to him, but you kind of keep an eye on the leader with this .22. And my mother told him, no, you either you believe in this nonviolence or you don't. And so she's up there with her, you know, crib baby, you know, believing that, you know, you stand for what you believe in. And I think that's that fierceness that, you know, Mike was talking about. And so I think that the nonviolence is something that has worked in this world. It has worked. You know, India, with all of its problems, is a vital and functioning democracy. The United States transitioned with civil rights through nonviolence, and yet we don't teach nonviolence to our children and how to behave and relate and negotiate and discuss and talk, you know, in a nonviolent manner to resolve conflict, and we don't practice it nearly enough as a nation. And so I think that, you know, she would say we have the tools of nonviolence, and we need to teach our youth and also teach the adults how to function in a more nonviolent manner.
I think also that the Celebrate Difference that she worked with at the King Center during the King celebration was able to get K through 4, 5 through 8, 9 to really see where we had been with the civil rights movement and how it worked, and show them how to take your adversary and turn him or her into your ally. And I think she was able to do that with young folk. I think that needs to be in the classroom. The reason so much violence is around us today is because it's not in the classroom, and I think a lot of her philosophy was to try and get it into the classroom. Hopefully one day it'll get into the classroom. But I think where we make the mistake is we don't have it so that they could hear it, feel it, and see it every day of their life. They hear it in January, but they don't hear it in February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. So, you know, so it needs to be year-round. And I think through the class structure, that was one of her ways of doing stuff. And I think what Samuel was talking in terms of earlier, a lot of the curricular stuff that we see today need to be rewritten, I guess, with the Gene Young philosophy.
Finally, Lucy, just how do you see Gene's presence today continuing in the Commission's work?
Of course, as I've said, I have a picture of her in my refrigerator, so her spirit is constantly with me, and I think all of us recognize how deeply she felt about this adult-youth partnership, and that really very much was initiated by her. And with the young people in our meetings, you know, we talk about our history and where some of this has come from and how it happened, and I think it's really the reason for our wanting to name our work after her, because of this very important contribution she made. And so I think that will always, be with us.
And we would be remiss if we ended this discussion without hearing from the man that loved her. Andy, would you come talk to us a minute about Jean?
Well, Jean was certainly a blessing in my life, and one of the things that I did one time when we went back to Marion, Alabama, and it wasn't very kind of me, but we passed by a fella she used to date in high school, and he had been to Korea and Vietnam and wasn't in such good shape. And she said, "Oh my God, that's one of my old boyfriends." And I said, "Aren't you glad you didn't marry him?" And she said, "Shit." If I had married him, he'd have been the mayor of Atlanta and the ambassador to the United Nations. And that was just that. And I think, though, that what she saw was the presence of God in everybody. And she worked to bring that out. I mean, it didn't make any difference. It really didn't make any difference to her. That if you respond as a child of God and believe that you are created in the image of God, then through the power of the Spirit of God and the presence of the Spirit of God, almost anything is possible. And we were encouraged to do things that were very different because of that belief. And it didn't just apply to us and her children, it applied to everybody. And I think that one of the other lessons I think we learned, that I learned also from Martin Luther King and from my grandmother, that death is not an end. That hardly a day passes that I don't say something about Martin Luther King. But hardly a day passes when Carolyn and I don't say something about Jean, or something that she would have done and made a difference in some way or other. And so I guess I say to all of you and to our children, and that's all of us, that when you change the name, it's significant, but it worries me that we are naming things and forgetting what the name means. Like, it bothers me that people at Frederick Douglass High School don't know who Frederick Douglass was, or that Ralph Bunche High School, people don't appreciate Ralph Bunche. And we try to go to Jean Childs Young School to see that they do know what she stood for. And what she stood for was the fact that the spirit and power of God was in each one of them. And if they understood that and knew that, then all things were possible for them. And I hope that in the continuation of this commission, we maintain that faith and continue to see it develop in many, many strange ways. And when I say many, many strange ways, I would say that we went to the Middle East together. And She was in refugee camps in Cambodia with Rosalind Carter. She and Ingrid Jones went to Zimbabwe to a children's conference. And looking at those pictures of these refugee children, these starving children, these children who haven't had any medicines, haven't had anything to eat, and as she took them in her arms, you knew that she knew that these were God's children, and that somehow they will prevail. It doesn't depend on what the president does. It doesn't depend on the foreign policy of the United States or the Sudan or the situation that the resolutions in the United Nations. Children are going to survive because God has intended that they survive. And you will meet some wonderful children. We have one working with us. 90 people in her family were killed in a genocide in Rwanda. And she drifted around Africa and Kenya and South Africa and Congo and somehow made her way to South Africa to learn a little English, and then got, how I still don't know, but to Buffalo. And in 3 years she got a college degree with honors, and another 2 years she got an MBA, and she came back and she's working with us, and she's 25. And she doesn't like to talk about the genocide. And she doesn't want to, she can't remember it without feeling all that pain. But when Carolyn asked her one day about didn't she feel afraid with something, and her answer was, I'm a kickboxer. I can kick like a giraffe. I will kick the so-and-so out of them if they bother me. And you know, and you wonder why our children, and Andrea was wandering around Africa when she was that age, and Paula was in Uganda when she was that age, teaching 90 children. And in the middle of 2 coups, and somehow putting your children and knowing that your children are in God's care and empowered by God, and believing that they will overcome whatever's put in their path. And when people ask me about what do I think about the Middle East, I say, I don't know, but I know that there's some children there. And they're Palestinian children, they're Christian children, they're Druze, and they're Israelis. And they're going to make it. And one of these days, when all of the killing is over, and when all of the adult foolishness clears the air, there are going to be some children that will create a holy land. And in a sense, that's what we saw here. James, when we went to Selma, it was not the adults, it was the little children. And in Birmingham, it was the little children that closed down the schools. Children are not leaders of tomorrow. Children lead everything we do today. And you rap folk make us buy all kind of funny baggy pants and drive the economy, and you know, but it's the power of God in the lives of children, especially because Jesus said, unless you become as a little child and let this power of God take you over, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And I think that's what I thank you all for continuing to keep alive, and I'm sure that that spirit does prevail.
I hope that you have found this to be a very special occasion today. It has been special for all of us who participated in doing it and bringing these stories and these ideas back to each of you to let you understand again why the commission has chosen to make the decision that they are going to announce to you when you all leave here and go to the next spot. And I know you've heard it over and over again, but then you'll get the official announcement in a few minutes. But at this time, I would like to bring to you the woman who has been carrying on the legacy of Jean and has worked tirelessly, and I mean tirelessly. And she makes everybody else work right along with her, but she works tirelessly. She is truly committed to the commission. Now, a lot of people talk about being committed. They just involved. I'm talking about real commitment to the commission. I bring you the executive director for 10 years, their first and only. So we're not only celebrating the 10th anniversary of the commission, we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of its executive director. Alice Johnson, come talk to us.
Thank you. The kids told me earlier they were betting on whether I would get through this without crying, so whoever bet, they're losing. I want to say to Andy that we are clear about the heavy burden we take on when we take Jean's name. We need it to remind us in the next decade how much more work we have to do, how much more we have to fight for the right of young people to participate in the decisions that affect their lives, that we cannot expect people to be leaders unless we allow them the opportunity to lead. And that what we've said today about the future of the organization, but more importantly, the future of young people in our community, we're recommitting ourselves in this very graphic way to saying that in the next 10 years, there will be ways that young people in this community, particularly young people who are so often left out, that there will be ways for them to be part of the community, to be listened to in the community, to use their talents and their abilities now, to shape with the courage and enthusiasm and optimism that they hold the future that we all are worried about. And there is no way that this organization will not make that commitment today in the name of Jean Young. And in that spirit, I want to ask some people to stand who have been involved in this work, either young people, some of them have left to start organizing the next thing that's going to happen and the one after that this afternoon, and recognize some of the commission members are here, some of the former commission members who are here, some of the old youth members. Some of the old people, we always get in a lot of trouble because we kick people out. You know, you turn 18, you finish high school, it's on to the next thing. And we always have to say to people, no, go on now. It's, it's time to do all that other stuff that needs to be done in the world. But I wanted to take a moment and ask the current and former commission members who are here today to stand, wave their hands, get an acknowledgement from the rest of us that you're here today. If you would do that, commission members. Kathleen, Lisa, Sandra, and Walt, Cleveland. Okay. And then we have, let's see, I think most of the, well, some of the current members of Kids for a Change in 5I and recently current members of 5I and Kids for a Change are here. These are the young people who are doing the work in the community. You're going to hear from them at the reception about the activities that they're conducting to make a difference. As I said, some of them are out already working on the next thing. But if, let's see, it's Dalitha and Justin and Amanda and Philip would stand. They're real houses and organizers. And in addition to Mike, who was one of the founding members, and if you look very carefully on that photo outside the council chamber, you'll see him. In addition to Mike, there's another person who has come in who is also in that photograph, and I'm going to ask Kwanda Allen Rodriguez to stand up. Kwanda was also a member of Kids for founding member of Kids for a Change back in 1992. They literally said to me one day, all right, I thought it was the last meeting, and they said, okay, well, what are we working on next? And as Lucy told you, that organization has been meeting every Thursday ever since. And they spawned a new group called 5I, For Youth by Youth, and they're going to tell you more about their work a little later, with their work in the community. There are so many friends of Jean, and there are some additional family members who have come in since Marion first asked them. So I'd just like to ask all of Jean's family to stand one more time and give everyone a chance to see you and thank you for your inspiration. Okay. I think that's it. I'm going to give you some directions now. We've had a wonderful program, and we have, let me say one more thing. We have some partners here who also work with the commission around the issue of reducing gun violence. And Ms. Head is a member of the board. Cass Robinson is someone who works very closely with us on those issues. Betsy Rivard is the president. Kathleen plays a dual role involved in that organization as well. And that's a 501c4. We have just created a 501c4 advocacy organization. We just got word from IRS that we passed, whatever it was that they were testing us on. And that gives us even more of an opportunity to do the lobbying, to do the advocacy work on behalf of children, but particularly around the issue of reducing gun violence, which we know is an epidemic in our country. So I'd like to thank the panelists again, and perhaps we could show our appreciation for all they've done. And I'd like to give you a few directions. When we leave this place, we'll ask you to go downstairs to the atrium, and we will be conducting a press conference at about 5. The mayor will be joining us at that press conference, and we're going to make this announcement revelation, which most of you probably already have figured out by now. And but we're going to do it officially, and then following that press conference, we'll be in the old council chambers for a reception and a program giving you some information about the work young people are doing now. So. One other thing, we're also going to give you an opportunity at the reception to get your own autographed copy of Andrea's book about Jean Young, the only book about Jean Young, called Life Lessons My Mother Taught Me. So we have a lovely rest of the evening planned, and we hope you'll be able to stay with us. And thank you again for all you do.